you do not have to be advanced to learn how to use a weapons mounted light. You just need to have the gumption to sack up, put it on your firearm, and train with it. That's it.
Welcome to Trigger Discipline, firearms knowledge for the novice, curious, and the experienced. We're your hosts, Nick and Pete. We believe that firearms don't have to be dangerous and terrifying. Firearms are not only a vital tool in our world, but they can be safely enjoyed with just the littlest of effort by the user. Welcome to another episode of Trigger Discipline. Today we're talking about the pros and cons of weapon-mounted lights. If you look up tools that should be in your everyday carry gear, a flashlight is always on that list. However, most of the time, there really isn't a discussion on whether or not your flashlight should be weapon-mounted. To help discuss this topic, we've brought back Jon Terry. In Season 2, Jon took the time to explain to all of us the importance of situational awareness. Welcome back, Jon, and if you could take a minute to remind our listeners about who you are, that would be great.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me back, by the way. It was a fun time last time, and I listened to the podcast a couple times. Hated every minute of it, just so you know, because I think I sound very nasally, probably from breaking this nose a few times. And I'm sure it got 0 likes. But, hey, if you guys think I'm there, and want me back, I guess I'll be here. So
last time I checked, it was like our most downloaded or second most downloaded episade.
Oh yeah, that's because I downloaded it like 25 times and it kept erasing. So yeah,
a lot of them were coming from one location. That makes sense now.
Right. You got a big family. We get it. We understand how it works.
Exactly. That's all it was. It was all the Terry family. So right. My background, just to give a quick brief on that, is started in the military when I was younger. I was 19. Yeah, 19. So, and that was in 01, or briefly right after that. I was in my first year of college. So I've been doing that ever since. I'm 2 years away from retirement, of which I will not do unless I'm forced to do, because I enjoy that sort of thing. I jump out of airplanes. I shoot a lot. I get to teach a lot within the military. And in that process of going through my military life and going through deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq, that's where I gained a lot of experience, met a lot of people. And through that process, it got me to started to get my focus and drive for any sort of job-oriented direction to kind of go in that pathway. With the military, there's a physical aspect too. So there for a little bit, I did personal training, and that was for about almost 3 years. At that time, I was also interested in doing firearms instruction, which is where I met Nick at one point. Started working at a place called 88 Tactical in Omaha, Nebraska, along with doing other side work in the instruction business, just because I knew that there was a plethora of business out there. I knew a lot of guys. They would ask me to help, stuff like that. So I've been doing instruction for the civilian market for about 4 years now. And then recently, within the last couple years, I started working for the DoD, overseas and locally. So I've done that. I have a background in security and personal security, detail work. And I work for some local companies as well, doing that kind of thing, armed security and whatnot. So, I would say that my background has lended me the ability to have a pretty good understanding of a lot of the topics you guys are going to be discussing, throughout all your seasons. So, I guess that about sums it up for me.
Awesome. So let's just start off with the very basic discussion about a flashlight before we hop onto the, should it be mounted to your weapon or not. But why should a flashlight be part of your everyday carry gear? I know this seems obvious, but for some people, not so much.
Well, I mean, the question behind that is something that's actually debated. So when you say it seems obvious, it only seems obvious to somebody who's taken an objective view to it. The problem is there's a lot of misinformation out there, and secondly, that there's a lot of people that get emotionally invested in some technique, and they're not ready or willing to change. And that's why I think this question comes about, and why the topic has to be discussed. Now, the importance of it is twofold. One, most things that happen bad, that tends to happen at night. You know, if you look up statistics, most things happen at night. You know, bad people like to be out there. You know, there's a song that was kind of written about that. And then next is you as a carrier, a firearm carrier, if you are going to put yourself out there to possibly handle any sort of an encounter at whatever threat level it may be, it is your duty, you know, as the person who's coming into that situation, to fully have a grasp as to who's bad or who's not, or who's a threat and who's not. So the flashlight gives you that ability to do so. So whether it's mounted to a weapon or in your hand, it's very important to carry some sort of lighting device when you're out at night. Plain and simple, you know. Yeah, I think that about does it for that one, you know, for that question.
Yeah, and the reason I want to say, like, you know, it seems obvious, but it isn't. And I'll just talk about my personal situation for a second here. Like, you know, I have two kids at home. Like, I'm usually home before night anyway. And then when I get home, I very rarely go out. If I am, it's going to someplace that's well lit already, you know, dropping my kids off at their after school activities. You know, during the winter, it'll get night obviously quicker. I don't carry a flashlight in my pocket, but I have one with me almost all the time just because of my day job. Sometimes I'll go into buildings that are, you know, the power's off. When you go into a building when the power's off, guess what? There's no lights. So I'll have one in my work bag all the time. And then I have one at night, like, you know, next to my bed. But yeah, like, I'm not a big fan of stuffing my pockets full of shit. So I don't feel the need to carry a flashlight, but I still think it's important that a flashlight is readily accessible.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with that. That's the thing, you know, you mentioned the point of going into a dark building in the day. You can't tell me that doesn't happen. You know, I mean, obviously in your field it does. There are some people that it happens more readily to than others, just due to the nature of their job. So, and I can also understand it from the standpoint that if you wear a suit and, you know, it's a lighter material suit, you know, something that's best suited for the summer, last thing you want is some bulky, you know, flashlight with the pocket, you know, pin thing coming out, whatever they call that, you know, the clip, you know, hanging out the side of that. That looks unprofessional, especially if you're in business attire. So I do understand it. But to your point, I think it is an important thing to be able to see when it gets dark, because we're not nocturnal, you know? So even if it's in your car and you have it during the day in your vehicle, you know, I mean, that's better than not having it, you know, at all. I mean, so accessibility, you know, the demands of accessibility kind of play a part with the environment that you find yourself.
Right.
Where do you I guess just for you personally, where would you keep the flashlights that you have? Like where do you need a flashlight? Accessibility to one.
Are you talking about like on? I guess unpack that a little bit more. On your body? You talking? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not.
I guess right off the bat, like just home, car, like things of that nature. Where would be the best scenarios to have these flashlights?
You know, when I think about it in terms of again, I try to take an approach of percentages, you know, of a normal American lifestyle. I would say in the vehicle is probably you know, one of your best places to have it. That way it's with you wherever you're going, because if you arrive somewhere and it turns out that it has more of a low light you know, potential, you can just grab it and keep it on your body. But again, you always have to take into, the personal approaches to life, clothing style, things of that nature. I would say in the vehicle is probably the best because we're always around our vehicle. And here's the best part, Pete, to answer that question. We all have a flashlight, and it's on what Nick is using right now, your phone. And that is something that people forget. So when people are telling me like, hey, look, maybe I don't want to stuff my pockets, I get it. But you already have it there. Granted, it's not the highest lumen, it doesn't have a good Candela count, but it does allow you to see at night in some sort of capacity at some distance, right? So at least you have something. And I would venture to tell most people that, hey, look, you have a flashlight, you just don't remember it. So, a lot of the listeners that are out there, just keep reminding yourself of that. Maybe pull it out and use it as a light every now and again instead of searching for that flashlight.
Absolutely. When you're in the field doing any sort of, I guess any sort of combat field work or anything like that, security, anything, how many flashlights do you usually carry?
Oh man, on a duty carry note, it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. I have one of my, if I'm carrying a rifle, there's one on the rifle. If I have a gun, there's one on the gun. And no matter what, there's always one in a pocket somewhere on my body. And if I'm carrying a pack of some sort, there's another one, a separate one in a pack. But I'm a redundant kind of person. And that's just due to my experiences, and it's not necessarily because I'm going to have something fail. It's because I want to have it accessible and quick in different modes as to I see fit for the environment, right, is having it available to give to somebody else if need be. Because something, I mean, obviously, especially on a duty thing, I mean, and this goes to police as well. They're doing a lot of solo work, but there's a lot of times also where they'll have backup and it's another person, right? So then they've got two people there. Well, maybe that person didn't show up as prepared to you, and now you can just hand off a handheld light to them. Be like, here, go on that side of the car. Make sure you have your light available. Use this.
Yeah.
So
no, absolutely, and it's got to be. I mean, it's got to be a good one too. Right?
Oh yeah, most definitely.
That's the when I was going through the academy. Obviously, we went through the one is none scenario and things like that. So we'd always have two of everything, at least minimum. I was fortunate that my partner that I worked with every night was the equipment guy. So he had like 900 flashlights, but every flashlight that you turned on, you would light up a city block with. Oh. So we could make fun of him as much as possible, but I'm going to tell you what, when we needed it, we used them a lot. We did.
Yeah, and you were thankful.
Absolutely. I never realized how important a flashlight was until, truthfully, until I was a cop and until I did get in those situations to where you needed them.
Right. And and I try to tell people, let's break it down once again. All these lessons learned are coming from people in the duty capacity, police, so law enforcement, firefighters, military personnel. But if you look at it from your standpoint, your day is your duty day. That is you're on shift. So why not have those capabilities at hand if need be? That's kind of like saying, hey, why do you carry a gun? Well, I don't know. I mean, statistics show that I'm more than likely going to have to use medical equipment and no medical care to save someone else's life or my own, before I have to use a firearm. But then yet we have a bunch of people that carry a firearm because there is a statistical probability nonetheless that you might have to use it, right? Flashlight is kind of in that same realm of you're going to end up probably using it. Just for instance, you're in a parking garage at 12 o'clock noon. There's no sun beaming down on you, and you drop your keys and it goes underneath your car. Instead of blindly fishing around for it, you turn on your cell phone light and you find them real quick, locate them, grab them, and there you go. You just used a flashlight for the purpose that is pretty damn important to you. You know what I mean? So when people talk about, flashlights and whatnot, I have one overarching comment, and that is that I answer their question with a question, and it's this: what advantage to having a flashlight somewhere, either on the gun or in your pocket or both, gets stripped from you when you have those on you? Can you?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I mean, it was that's actually, one of the things that you go over when you're in the academy. You dedicate a week to nothing but low light tactics and flashlight work, so you can control people with your flashlight. That's the reason why when a cop comes up to you or a police officer comes up to you, that their flashlight's in your eyes, so you look away, so you're away, so you get the advantage off of everything. What was that, Nick?
So, and the light on their car that's blinding you right from the beginning too.
Yep, right off the bat, you take your spotlight, you put it right on the driver's side mirror. Why is that? That's so you look away from the mirror, and then it won't backlight you as you're going to the car. Yep. Right? It gives you so much of a tactical advantage having that flashlight. And I mean, being on a firearm is no different, in my opinion.
Oh no, and that's the thing is, it's an opinion that has been backed by real life issues. You can go online and you can look at all sorts of scenarios, real world scenarios that have occurred, situations that have occurred where officers have used it, and don't get me wrong, if there were more CCTV cameras available to the public in general, you'd probably see a lot of times where a generalized civilian who carries would have benefited from utilizing a light. We just don't have that because we don't, granted your cell phone is a recorder, but if you're the one who's getting approached by a potential threat, right, and you take armed carry seriously, last thing you're going to do is pull your phone out and start recording. Right. If it's an actual potential threat.
Well, most of us, yeah. I think there's a lot of people out there would do that.
Okay, correct. But for instance, in one of my classes that I teach, one of them, the CCW class that I teach for 88, we do have a video in there, and it does show a guy who is carrying and is videotaping. But the title of it is "Idiot." and we do that because the scenario shows how he actually escalated the force to deadly force, and therefore justly, per the law, he was then put, in jail and whatnot for it. But on the same hand, he actually serious about, being a person who can carry appropriately? Was he serious about being a responsible armed protector? You know what I mean? As per the video, and the only thing I can come up with as a Monday night quarterback is that he didn't take it as serious as he should have. So you're right. Yeah, there's always the opposite to what I'm saying. But I think as a responsible carrier, last thing you should do is be bringing it up to videotape the scenario. If you're going to bring your phone out immediately, it better be to call 911.
Okay, well, to kind of circle back, so what type of flashlight should a person be using as part of their everyday carry gear? I know this could range depending on how you're using it, but if anybody who was a child in the 90s, the first thing you remember about cops is the big 60-pound mag light that we probably all have or had at one point. I think I have one somewhere in my house. The battery's probably died 6 years ago, but what type of flashlight should you have?
To answer the question, obviously it depends on the location, how you're planning on using. If Streamlight Streamlight, the company, makes really good lights, high lumen, decent candela count, which real quick before I finish the answer, let me kind of talk about that. Lumen count and candela count are something that if you're going to get in the weeds on a flashlight, you want to pay attention to those two things. The reason is one, lumens is that bright overarching halo of light that you're going to get. The candela is within that halo of light, the brighter light in the center. Okay, the more focused it gets. Now, you want a lot of candela if you can get it from a light. And the reason is because that is going to help with a breakage of through, like breaking your light through photonic barriers. Okay, so what I mean by that for all those that are listening is let's talk about headlights. All right, when a headlight is aimed at you or in towards your face in any sort of capacity, you have, that is a photonic barrier. All right, so if I was to have, say, a truck that's parked to my left, and its beams, its light beams are going across my viewpoint, all right, from left to right. And I have a person on the other side of that vehicle, okay, on the other side of that beam, you know, press, all right? And I want to shine my light on that person to see who they are. A good candela count on top of a high lumen count will press through that light and expose that person to my flashlight so that I can see who they are, what they're doing. All right. And that's what I mean by photonic barriers. And especially if you live in a city, there's a ton of those out there. So again, now reverting back to the question, you want a good flashlight that has a high lumen count and hopefully a decent candela count. Now, the bigger the flashlight, the more powerful it's going to be typically. So you're going to get a higher lumen count. You're going to get a better candela count. However, if you're going to carry something smaller on you that's a little more concealable for, you know, the everyday carry purposes, I would say you're going to want something smaller. It's probably only going to be maybe 300 to 500 lumen. Candela count's probably pretty low, but it's better to have something like that over nothing, you know? So I carry a Streamlight. It's, I don't know, probably about 4 inches in length. And I want to say it's a 500 lumen count. And that's what I carry as like an offhand, non-weapons mounted light. It's pretty good. It's very durable. It's made of a good, you know, aircraft aluminum casing, so it still keeps it kind of light. Has a press button on the back. It has the clip for your pocket, and again, the lumen count is enough to where if I needed to verify something, it's pretty good. It's pretty good for a small light. Now, if I'm going to keep one in the car, yeah, I'm going to go with a bigger light. Maybe not a mag light, you know, that's the size of a baton. But, you know, just because that's pretty unwieldy, but I can still get a good handheld light that's a little bit bigger, and I'm going to get far more lumens and candela out of that. So, you know, placing a light in an appropriate place, that's something to think about.
Yeah, I think a lot, like a lot of the little lights, I mean, you know, you can obviously buy some dirt cheap ones at the store, but I mean, Amazon, you know, they have some pretty good ones that they just don't cost a lot of money. And then, you know, they're good quality. With LED technology now, I mean, you're going to get a pretty decent lumen output regardless. The one I have, and this kind of leads me to my next question, if that's okay. The one I have has a couple of different settings. One of them is like a beam spread setting. And I think that's a good way to kind of create that candela that you were talking about. You know, because I can decide how, like, you know, if it has a really big beam spread, there's not a whole lot of light, but you get farther coverage. If you pull the, you know, the top of the flashlight out a little bit, that beam gets concentrated more towards the center of it. You can do it to the point where, like, it's basically a pinpoint on the wall, and that's going to be your highest candela rating there, but that's not going to be helpful. So I think just by practicing a little bit, you can probably find that, you know, kind of that sweet spot where you're getting a good field of vision from your left to your right, but you're still getting a good, nice, bright spot in the middle. The things that I'm not really sure about that one are they have like a high beam setting, a low beam setting, and then a strobe setting. I can see why you'd want your high beam setting as just your standard default, because that's what you want to, you know, turning your flashlight on to see what the fuck's going on. I can see what the benefit for the strobe setting is, but I mean, is there really a need for all these settings, or can you just get by with the one setting flashlight?
So my opinion, and this is obviously, you know, what we're kind of going off, but you know, from my experiences, in my opinion, when I deal with when I've dealt with a potential threat and needed the flashlight, I didn't start clicking buttons and going through all my settings, right? Because that's just not what you do. You're focused on this potential threat. You're trying to make your decisions by discerning what is in front of you. You bring out the light and you turn it on, and whatever's on there is what you get. All right. And that's because you've got a lot going on in a short amount of time, especially at night. Everything seems like, especially time, it seems like it goes by so much faster because you're not taking in as much information, because once again, we're not nocturnal. So hence the reason for lights, right? So when I see a flashlight that tells me it's got all these gee whiz settings, I'm like, okay, what's the cost? What's the size? What's the weight? And what am I doing with it, right? And if I look through all that and I say, okay, you know, I'm not using this for utility purposes all the time. I'm also using it for a defense purpose. The utilities purpose is what tends to get used for, but its purpose of being bought is defense. Then I want simple. I want, you know, simpler is better. KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid. So one beam, press it, boom, it's on. And don't get me wrong, I did buy, you know, the EDC light that I have. It comes with those three settings: high beam, low beam, and strobe. And I'm not gonna lie, I fucking hate it because there's times where I bring it up and you know, and I'll do something quick. So I'll see something and I'll turn it off, and then I'm like, I want to check that again. I'll check it again, but I do it fast enough to where now it switches from the high beam to the low beam. And I'm like, God damn it. And then I press it again, and then it goes to strobe. And I'm like, God. You know, and it's just like this you know, comedic act in my head, you know, and then I finally get back to the high beam and I'm like, oh, okay, that's what it was. So when I think of it in the terms of a defensive purpose, you know, I rather have just the one setting, which is why I pay attention to that lumen and candela count in the description of the item before I purchase it. So that's kind of where I go with all those settings. Now, again, are there uses? Sure. You know, like I said, you know, purpose built. So for a police officer who actually has to go hands-on quite a bit, man, that strobe, if they are taught how to use it, the strobe can be a debilitating thing on the person that's on the receiving end, as far as mobility and force is concerned. But it has to be used appropriately, which means they got to get trained on it, and it has to be constant. You know, they have to know how to use it, and they got to know that strobe has to be constantly in the eyes. And if an attacker knows how to defeat a strobe, which there is a way to defeat it, then the person using that strobe in a force on force scenario needs to know that. And like I said, again, that means training. So that just adds another level of complexity to your force on force, you know, capacity that maybe some people aren't willing to go for. So yeah, if you're not willing to go take some low light courses and learn from people such as myself or other people, you know, within the industry that actually know what they're talking about, then yeah, keep it simple. Get one that just has a high lumen, high candela count.
So yeah, maybe I guess we can jump into the topic on hand here. I've read probably 10 different articles on this subject about weapon mounted lights, and each one offers their own different opinions, it seems like. So let's get yours, see if we can make it 11. I guess the biggest thing about weapon mounted lights, the biggest thing that a lot of people have a problem with, and a lot of people that are pretty validated as far as their expertise in the gun world. You know, they've been military training, police training, they've been in law enforcement, you know, they've done all that stuff. Some of them just absolutely hate weapon mounted lights because the biggest problem you have is when you're basically pointing your flashlight at somebody, you're pointing your gun at somebody. So I guess if you wanted to give us your starting opinion on why you should mount your light to your weapon versus keeping it handheld, or which the pros and cons of each.
So that's why I promote the carry of both. I promote for your carry to have a weapons mounted light, like as if, and I know that the viewers or the listeners can't see what I'm showing you, but having a light on there, I mean, look at that. I mean, this is a bulky light. This is one of the bulkier ones, the Surefire, and it's not even that bulky. So you could definitely conceal this. I have a holster that conceals this exact, frame. And then I have my cell phone, or I have my EDC light. So really carrying both would diminish any arguments against it. Again, overreaching, question to answer a question is, what advantages do you lose when you add a light to your gun or to your carry or to your person carry? You don't. When it comes to people being naysayers, I think there's a few things that you have to remember as a potential person who's looking for advice or a potential customer of a training source, and that is one, not about their vetting and their background necessarily, but what are they trying to do? Are they trying to make money in a market that's overwhelmed with a lot of people? Yes. Two, when you are in a market that has a lot of people competing for business, you tend to get a lot of people trying to make gee whiz protocols, if you will. They're trying to put their own spin on stuff. So I would definitely, that's one of the great things about being in Nebraska, in Omaha, especially, is you don't have a ton of people, really trying to compete against each other to gain that tactical training community, civilian wise, as far as the customer is concerned. So therefore you're going to get less of that gee whiz crap. Crap, I don't call it crap. Everybody's got techniques. Sorry, I didn't mean to piss people off, but I'm going to anyway.
That's okay.
So here's the deal. A lot of guys are spitting a lot of shit. They're spitting a lot of crap, and it's either because they need to make money and they're trying to gain their own niche, which is, in my opinion, probably the most probable course as to why people are doing that. And secondly, people are getting too complex. Once again, even if they're in the military, police, firemen, whatever, anybody knows that if you've been trained to take care of a situation under stress, okay, in high duress, keeping everything simple is your route to success in every one of those scenarios. So when somebody says, oh man, and they talk about this, and then they completely just go off the wall as to like why, and they can talk about it for 2 hours about all their opinions, I don't know. I question it. I question it a lot, because in my experience, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to have a light in multiple areas on you. People talk about, well, you're pointing your gun at people. Am I? Because guess what? Here's the reason I question that. Even with this, okay, I don't have to beam right on somebody to see them. I can point this gun at the ceiling, and the bounce of the light off the ceiling or off a wall can then show me more of the room anyway than just focusing my light onto a specific area of, the place that I want to see. So again, training does come into play, and it comes into play as long as you're getting good training, quality stuff from people who actually know. So, to the naysayers out there, I'd like to say two things. One, don't get emotionally attached to your way of doing things. Open your mind. Okay. Understand that technology has a way of changing tactics and techniques, and go on ahead and open your mind up to it. Look at some of the pros and cons, take a class, and make some decisions for yourself. Two, dogma is what leads to failure. Okay. dogma leads to failure. So if you keep that in your mind, and someone says always or never, maybe you should question it a little bit more. All right. Because let's face it, everybody in a lot of scenarios within their life have said always and never. And then what do they talk about? Oh man, I used to say when I was younger, I'd never do this. And then sure shit, as a parent, they did this,
Right.
So, so yeah, dogma and over complexity are two things you got to work out.
Absolutely. So, basically what you're saying is always carry more than just your flashlight on your weapon. And obviously that's what I believe too. I don't have just a bunch of guns in my house mounted with flashlights, and those are the only flashlights that I have around. So I really think that with the question, with the naysayers about pointing your gun, when you're pointing your flashlight, you're also pointing your gun. Well, there's obviously a reason why you have your gun out. You're not just using that flashlight and walking around and patrolling areas with it, correct?
Oh yeah, that's 100% correct. And again, I think that's why the argument exists, just due to the fact that people aren't explaining it in a relative fact of life. They're like, well, if you do that, then you're pointing your gun. Yeah, but everybody's got a fucking phone today, and they all have a light on it. You can always pull the phone, see something, and if you can consider it a threat, drop it, get to your weapon, and turn the light on your weapon, and now you've just upped your force and your defensive capabilities, all while maintaining a light source.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing too, is that I'm thinking, like, if I'm putting myself in a scenario that I'm in my car and I have to get out, I have to go down an alley or something like that, my first thought isn't to grab my gun and use my flashlight on my gun, right? Like nobody does that.
Right.
Or, I guess I won't say nobody, but most people don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I will. I don't know. I don't see the argument as you're pointing your gun at somebody when you're using your flashlight on your gun, because yeah, you absolutely are, but there's a reason why you have your gun out. You're not just using it to walk around the house and check fuses.
Yeah, and see, to that point, like, I think the bigger argument, it's not necessarily geared towards, like, law enforcement, who chances are when they're responding to a call, like, there's going to be a threat there. It's more towards, like, the person who gets woken up in the middle of the night and they have no idea what's downstairs. Is it your kid in the fridge, getting a snack at 2:00 in the morning? But again, like, you just shouldn't be the person who picks up your gun and uses that as your light source, even if, depending whatever sound you hear in the middle of the night.
Well, and to that scenario, you hear a window open or a thump in the night. Here's the deal. I had a buddy years ago who didn't have a weapons mounted light, and he was staying, down. It was a split level home. He was down in the lower level, had a walkout patio door, and he was sleeping on the couch. Woke up to a person coming in through the sliding glass door. Turns out it was the boyfriend of his, like, niece or something like that was also there. Whatever the scenario was, it was a multi-use home. Multiple people were in this home, and he didn't have a weapons mounted light, and it freaked him out. He pointed the gun at the person, couldn't really tell who it was, had to go through this drawn out, not long, but drawn out, scenario of freeze, don't move, I'll blow your head off, backing away from the individual, getting to a switch on the wall, and then finally flipping it on, and then finding out that, it's this boyfriend. And it's just like, hey man, all that could have been curtailed if you had a weapons mounted light. I'm not saying that the threat would have been curtailed, but what I'm saying is the positive ID could have happened earlier, right? And if you're not training, if you're not subjecting yourself to scenarios that put you in a stressful event and forcing you to make decisions, then when you find yourself in that particular event, you don't know how you're going to act. And without that PID, and especially if you're scared out of your wits because somebody's just coming in through a sliding glass door and you're sleeping, 12 feet away from it, you might end up pulling the trigger on that person. And it is your duty as, again, I'll reiterate that, it's your duty as the carrier, it's your duty as the protector to make that positive ID and not shoot the wrong fucking person, So, and that's when, and this is where a little bit of my passion comes in, because I get sort of worked up when I hear some of these arguments, it's like, stop with the fucking arguments. If you have it on there, then it allows you to gain more information at a faster rate, and information gives you reaction time. Right. And that, unfortunately for me, I also deem that as a, something that's just innate, but a lot of people don't think of gaining information in a time window as an advantage or disadvantage. Right. But I do. And that's what I try to impart on people that I teach is, hey, look, time is also a particular factor of quote unquote distance that allows you to react. All right. It's called a reactionary gap. So time in which you gain information and the amount of information you gain, whether it's too much or too little, can affect the outcome of an engagement. All right. And that's again why I'm a big proponent of having a light source.
No. So that's a really good point, because a lot of the accidental shootings that give gun ownership in general a bad name are, scenarios exactly like that, where you don't have the time to make the right decision. You're trying to preserve your life and, your family's in the house. So you make the wrong call and shoot somebody accidentally. And if you have your weapon mounted light, that gives you the opportunity to make the right decision. And even if it is your daughter's boyfriend sneaking in the middle of the night, probably shouldn't shoot him in the foot at least, or anything like that. But
is that right though? Should you not shoot him?
I don't know.
Well, I have a son, so I'm not going to shoot his girlfriends that are sneaking in. I might tell him to get the fuck out, depending on his age. No, the Christian in me says he's got to go. She's got to go. But so I can't speak to the whole boyfriend thing. But what I can say is I have been protective of other females, as like a niece or nephew kind of thing. And yeah, man, point that weapon, maybe not such a bad idea, at least.
Just leave it on them just a little bit longer than you need to.
Right.
As long as it doesn't have a flashlight on it, you should probably be all right.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got 4 boys and I've got the 2 girls in this group, so
yeah,
I have to wait to see what no one has.
No, but that's the thing in it, and your story. I mean, it brings up. Why would you? It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, right? I mean, with everything. But to me, a gun mounted or a gun mounted flashlight is it's the same thing. It's the same idea to me.
Oh yeah, one of the other arguments that I've actually come across and this is in a professional manner too, is one-handed manipulation. All right, learning how to utilize the flashlight with one hand while also shooting effectively, and also doing it offhand, one-handed. To those arguments, I always say, okay, well, how did you learn how to shoot a gun in the first place? Guess what? Now you put a light on there, maybe you should train. And that's not hard to do. You don't even need to shoot ammo to learn how to manipulate your particular weapons mounted light with one hand. And I've also had one argument, and this is only one, and it was so astonishing to me. And that was, well, what if it turns on inadvertently through like draw or something, or maybe your finger taps it? And it's like, well, if that's the case, then you need to do a little more proprioception work with your distal phalanges, meaning your finger, and be aware of where that fucker is, because that's the whole point about safe finger, and keeping your finger off the trigger. So if you're not keeping it off the trigger and you're not keeping it off your weapons mounted light and it's just going off inadvertently, then, that's a whole nother problem. So, there are a number of, of arguments out there, but they're pretty easy dam to squash, in my opinion.
Yeah. One of the things that you were talking about is obviously training with that on your weapon, and training the manipulation of it and things like that. When you go through any low light tactic training, I mean, first things first, I've never heard of anyone that says, hey, first thing we're going to do is we're going to flip on that light and we're going to start walking around this warehouse for a little bit. We're going to start just shining the shit out of everything, right? I mean, it's all light on, light off manipulation, not giving away your position, things of that nature. So when you have that in your house, if you haven't gone through the training, yeah, I think one of the first things you probably do is flip it on and walk around. But that's where training is so important, right? I mean, training teaches you that, no, you don't have the thing on the whole time. You have it on when you come in contact with that target. You have it on to light your path. You have it on, for any of those types of situations. And I mean, really, like, that's where the training aspect of all of this is so important still.
Well, I like to tell people that when you think about shooting, when you think about your physical fitness, when you think about learning a new language, what do? You somehow get taught. That's what should be the thing to happen. But when people want to learn a new language, they go somewhere, they talk to somebody, or they get on an app or something like that, and it teaches them how to do it. But then when it comes to shooting, or it comes to their physical fitness, they just all assume that they, are adequate enough with whatever background or lack thereof that they have to go shoot guns or to go train physically. And it's like, that's not how the real world works. That's not how it works. If you haven't educated yourself, or you haven't been put in those positions, how do you know how to use your light? How do you know? I mean, when I say photonic barrier, how many people that are going to listen to this haven't heard about that being an issue with flashlights? Probably most of them. All right, unless they've gone through training, or they've gotten into scenarios where it's happened.
Or you're an electrical engineer by day and you understand
Right?
the concept. Yeah.
Yep. So that's why I try to tell people, it's like, look, get training. Ultimately, get training, no matter what. With a weapons mounted light or not, with a handheld light or not, get training.
So a lot of people that are getting into guns, I mean, there's certain things that they're just not comfortable with. So if they're not comfortable with mounting a light to their weapon, just for, some of the reasons we talked about, assuming they're eventually going to get there, what would you recommend that they do to use a flashlight with their weapon prior to that point?
Well, I would say that first and foremost, if you're not comfortable with a weapons mounted light as of yet, that's fine. Start learning how to shoot one-handed. It's something that a lot of people don't practice, because if you do find yourself in a spot where you need to use it, and let's use the bump in the night scenario, which I think is probably what the majority of people think about when they think of needing light. All right. And I don't know the statistics, but I'm going to say that just by generalization, that's probably the most accurate portrayal of when most people would probably need it. And I will say this: if you have a scenario where something goes bump in the night, if you don't already have, say, some sort of night light system or something like that that's in your house, and it's already given ambient light to where you can see outside of your bedroom door into the areas that you'd be, focused on, then go on ahead and buy a weapons mounted light, and let's get yourself accustomed to it. Let's get yourself familiar with it, so that you're no longer outside of that subcomponent of shooters or home protectors. All right. That's what I would say, is go on ahead, buy one, train yourself, or get some training, and preferably get some training, and get used to it. All right. If you're an EDC person, and concealed carry, and you're just not familiar with it, and you're uncomfortable with it, buy one, start dry firing with it, start carrying it unloaded, start again, do your dry fire. One of the things that I tell people when I've done some home defense consultations, if you will, I've told people, hey, look, you need a way to discern who is in your house, and you can't hit every switch in your house as somebody is already in there, right? So you can't illuminate a room unless you go in that room. So you just got closer to your target. That's bad juju. So you need to make sure that you have a way to discern who's in there. And the only way you're going to get that is by holding onto a flashlight, either with your support hand or on the weapon itself. So I've told everyone, we need to go ahead and get you trained up on whichever you prefer. And we need to find a way. If it's a financial problem, let's wait till you got the finances, buy you one, and then let's find a way to get you familiar with having a weapons mounted light. So overarching wave top is, if you're not familiar or you're uncomfortable, get one and let's get you there. It's not difficult. It's just something you're unfamiliar with right now. And it is very easy to become familiar and to become adequately, what's the term I'm looking for here? You'll be adequate at using.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like you were talking about having lights on in your house. I mean, if you're not to that point yet where you are comfortable with a weapon mounted light, like for instance, we always have a bathroom light in our hallway, like the hallway that goes down the stairs. That's kind of like your, what some people call it, like your death funnel or whatever, like that's where I'm going to stand if people are in my house. And as soon as they cross it, like they're right there in my crosshairs. But that bathroom light, it always started off as, it was just the light that was on for the kids. They wanted a light on in case they had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. And just researching this topic, I realized, holy crap, that actually provides like a lot of light downstairs. So even if I didn't have a weapon mounted light and I had a flashlight, I could at least get down that point past that restroom, still seeing quite a bit. And then, I could have my flashlight ready as long as I didn't have it turned on to like my low beam right off the bat, because I have my stupid 3-mode flashlight.
Yeah, that 3-mode will get you every time. That's one thing that's obviously, if you're not going to carry a light, you're not going to put a light on your gun for whatever reason that you deem, is your reason. Again, for home defense, there's other ways around that, like you said, and how I mentioned it, ambient light. Just get yourself a bunch of night lights and plug them in around your home, and that's going to give you a lot of ambient light that you're going to be able to see a lot of areas, because your eyes, because you've been asleep, are already well adjusted to the dark. So that ambient light is just going to be more amplification for information that you can gain. So yeah, if you're not gonna put one on there, then do something to bring light to the situation. Great statement, huh? Little pun there.
So now that we've decided that weapon mounted lights they're okay, don't be afraid of them. Another one of the arguments is people, there's been instances where people accidentally get shot because of the way the weapon mounted light is activated. So I know there's different ways to turn your weapon mounted light on. Maybe you could explain some of those different ways and what you would recommend.
Yeah, sure. The obviously it's going to depend on the model, the manufacturer of the light, but I would say this. There are 3 lights out there that I would say, if you're going to put one on your pistol, that you should probably look into. Surefire's top of my list for duty use, because it is extremely, extremely durable. It has a waterproof component to it, which is why it's used by the military. So durability wise, drop wise, all that sort of stuff, testing. For duty, Surefire. If you don't want something as expensive but still really, really good, Streamlight. Streamlight makes a number of models that attach to your firearm. They're very well known within the industry, so you can get a holster for them as well. And then you've got, oh man, what's the other one? I'm sorry, I just drew a blank all of a
Phoenix?
sudden. Well, I'm sorry.
Phoenix?
No, no. Man,
Tycho.
their version is the APL and the APL Charlie. It is Enforce. So those are the three that I recommend. And the only reason I recommend them is because I've tested them out. I've used them in multiple capacities. I have the Enforce on my Glock 19 that it's in an appendix carry holster. The reason why I like that one is because it's very thin. It is no wider than the gun itself. And the paddles that of which you would use, it's an ambidextrous paddle system. It comes all the way back to the inside rim of your trigger guard. So not the outside rim, the inside rim of your trigger guard. So literally your finger, no matter how stubby it might be, if it can work the trigger, it can reach the paddle system on that flashlight. The only problem with Enforce is that they don't necessarily make them the brightest. All right. But I do like them. They're very thin. They have a great intuitive paddle system on there to turn them on with either side. If you're shooting support hand or strong hand, one-handed or not, does not matter. And they're light. They're made of plastic. Okay. Now you bang them up against stuff, eventually you're going to break it. Don't get me wrong. But, you know, I mean, for the price that they're selling them at, for the usage that they're going to get for the normal human being that's walking around carrying during his everyday normal working life, that's a great choice in my opinion. The other one, like I said, was Streamlight. Stepping back in reverse, Streamlight is a little bit more of an expensive option. They're more durable. They come in metal casings. They're very bright. Their system is very, they mimic and are very similar to the Surefire systems. Okay, so they toggle rather than having a paddle switch. They toggle. At least the models that I'm familiar with. There might be newer models that maybe came out since SHOT Show that I'm not aware of just yet that might have a paddle system to it. But what's kind of cool about them is I know that Surefire makes a toggle like cover that goes on their existing pieces, and it extends it into to actually come back further more toward the trigger so that it's closer for your trigger finger on either hand if you were to manipulate it singly. So, you know, single-handedly. So there are modifications that are out there for both the Streamlight and the Surefire using their toggle switch system that you can utilize to gain a little bit more dexterity from your fingertip, you know, onto the switch itself, so that you're aware of how it's being manipulated, whether it's going to go full on or momentary, which are the two settings typically for those two lights. So the way you handle that in a nutshell is you buy one, you see if there's any modifications, which I just told you there are, and then you just gotta do some draws and turn it on, you know, with both two hands and one hand. The other, there is one other way to do it when you're shooting with both hands, and that is using your support thumb on the toggle systems. So on the Streamlight and the Surefire, you can utilize your thumb that is actually pointing the way, if you will, as you hold the gun. You can use that lead thumb tip to curl down and press down on the toggle system to turn on the flashlight. That is another method by which a lot of people, and highly respected, highly regarded people, utilize in order to turn on the flashlight when they need to use it on their weapon itself.
So since a lot of the people that we're trying to target with our podcast are like the people that are kind of new to this and unsure about that, would that last method be the one that you would recommend to someone who is, you know, the most, I guess, unsure about everything and afraid that they're accidentally going to shoot somebody?
No, I would actually refer back to the Enforce light. it's far more intuitive. It takes far less repetitional training to gain a grasp as to how to utilize that light. Again, because it's a lightweight, it's very intuitive. It has an intuitive paddle system, and it's slimline, but it's also simple. So you're not going to go through a number of different ways. It's not going to have this momentary switch along with a full on or a constant on switch mode. It's not going to have any of that. It's literally turn it on or turn it off. I think that's probably for a new user, I would say that's probably the best. And the reason why I use those three as an example is because those are the most, as far as the industry is concerned, those are kind of the ones that you see that are most prevalent out there, being utilized, being trained with, and the holster companies are making holsters for. So I would say go with an Enforce if you're brand new to the light discipline, as you will, and you want to get familiar with something that takes less training. I would go with the Enforce.
And that Enforce, you said that's manipulated by your trigger finger?
All right. So I went and got the gun real quick so I could kind of talk this out. So the paddle system, like I said, it's intuitive, and it draws the actual levers that you would press back all the way to the trigger guard, or just to the almost to the inside of that rim. So yeah, when you go to actually get the light and turn it on, if you have your index finger straight and indexed on the side of the gun like it should be before you make that conscious, no shit, I got to pull this trigger effort, you can literally drop it down to the side, and you feel it, and you just turn it on. And you can do that on either side. It's actually a really good design. I really like the design. And like I said, it's intuitive. So, so it has that non-force of will. It's as long as you are making the effort to just bring your finger down and press on the paddle, that's all it means. Outside of that, you don't have to do anything different to your grip. You don't have to do anything different with your support hand versus your firing hand. It's a very good, well thought out system to turn on and off. But like I said, it's also simple. So on, off. There is no momentary. It clicks on or it clicks off, and that's again one of the aspects to it that I like, along with the fact that it's streamlined, it's intuitive to use, and it's still, I think this one's 250 lumens because I got one of their first gen ones here.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a really, really well thought out system. I just wish they made it more durable for duty use. That's it.
Gotcha. And with that system, it's ambidextrous, so you can manipulate it with that gun hand, or can you manipulate it with that off thumb as well?
Oh yeah,
sport hand.
Yeah. So if you had to shoot with either hand single-handedly, it is ambidextrous. You can use that trigger finger you just drop it away from the frame just slightly, and you're on the paddle. But if you were shooting two hands, you can manipulate it with the thumb or your trigger finger. So you don't have to necessarily move that trigger finger and potentially have that, what some people might fear of as being that inadvertent firing of the firearm because they move their trigger finger. You don't have that if you want to just use your thumb, so.
Absolutely. Yep.
So yeah, but again, it's just like everything else. You got to train with it.
And whatever you're comfortable with, really.
Yep.
So,
but when you say that, whatever you're comfortable with, a little side note to that is the best guys out there that use some of the latest gear, they only get comfortable with it because they put it on their firearms and then they use it. So, when I talk to people who are brand new, I'm like, hey, look, there's a lot of instructors out there that will tell you, like, keep it slow, start doing like this or that. I'm kind of opposite of what a lot of the industry is pitching. Like, hey, look, your first range session, let's shoot slow. After that, let's pick up the pace. Let's make your draws more streamlined. Let's get them to where you're pulling fast, okay? Even if it's just during dry fire. But, and then let's add complexity, a little bit of complexity, meaning let's add a light to it. Let's change let's change up the sighting system. Let's use an RDS if need be, something like that. So, because the only way you're going to get comfortable with something is to work with it. So, that's one of the things I do promote is a faster learning curve, because to give and to kind of give a little bit of history with learning curves myself, my own perspective, the fucking military, man, for everything that they do, you know what they didn't do? They did not open my horizons when it came to firearms. They didn't. It was like, use your service rifle. Here's a pistol. Here's the stupid quals that we deem to be necessary for you to deploy, of which are not advanced by any means, and go forth and do good things, and I'm talking from a conventional standpoint. I'm not talking, these special operations units, but from a conventional standpoint, that's all they get. So, that opened my eyes, because that's how I started off, was conventional. And it opened my eyes once I went to a civilian training course, and I was like, holy shit, like, I'm good in my unit, but I suck out here. The civilian market actually has a lot better shooters, a lot more proficient firearms users. And that's why I do heavily promote training from civilian companies, because of the fact that you will get, especially now with the GWAT being, what are we at? Like 15, 17 years, something like that. I don't even recall, because it's been so long. But with the GWAT being, what it's been for, so long, we've had a lot of high-end trained guys coming into the training market, and they've changed the face of firearms training. And that's why I promote getting used to something right away. You do not have to be advanced to learn how to use a weapons mounted light. You just need to have the gumption to sack up, put it on your firearm, and train with it. That's it.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much for your time. I mean, I know you keep saying that you think you talk a lot, but it's all valuable information. So that's what we need.
All right, man. Well, thanks. As long as I'm doing good and doing right, by the listeners and by you guys, that's the important part. So
awesome.
Yeah, man. We appreciate it. So thanks,
cool, brother. All right, take it easy, fellas.
All right. Talk
See you later.
Talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Trigger Discipline. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Links are in the description.
You can view our website at triggerdiscipline.info or contact us